Hi guys, Togo here with a new video, and this video will be my top 5 best specs in the War Within that I would recommend for new players, but also veteran players. If you are asking me which specs you should play in the War Within, those would be the 5 specs I would recommend anyone to play. Now obviously, you don't need to follow those 5 specs, because I don't follow those 5 specs neither, but I would say that it is like a high success rate. So if you're playing those specs, you're going to enjoy your time in the War Within from the get-go, regardless of meta. And if they get nerfed in the future, you could still play it, because I think the kit is really well made to the point where you are going to enjoy it regardless. Now, before we start, a word from my sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Trade Skill Master add-on, in short, TSM. TSM is for everyone, whether you're just looking to have a few more golds, or you are a skilled trader that looks to flip millions of gold every single month. TSM can help you manage your auctions with ease. This will make sure you're not underselling your precious items, but also not overpaying your future purchases. It can be used to drive your professions to the next level. It will show you what's most profitable to craft, but also the add-on offers now a new premium packages, may I say, that help you elevate your gold making game. Tapping in TSM's vast database, helping you with your next decisions on what to buy and also what to sell. Use my link in the description to get 15% off your first purchase of premium TSM package. Thank you to TSM for sponsoring this video, and we will now set our eyes onto the video. So let's start with the top 5. The top 5 has obviously a few melees, a few ranged, but also a healer. So let's start with the healer of the spec I would recommend for anyone to play. It is Preservation Invoker. Now, I know this lizard is not aesthetically great. It is what it is, but the gameplay is really fun. You could play Chrono Warden or Flame Shaper, I think the hero talent is called, and they are both actually fun to play. And I think Preservation is the most fun healer spec you could play for any DPS mains, but also any healer main. Although the range is quite low, I do feel like Preservation Invoker is meta in all regards. I think it actually needs a nerf, but it doesn't seem like they're going to get nerfed, because they have now their like time in the light, I would say, and they are going to perform very well. Good thing to note, Preservation Invoker is like really well versed in how they play, and you could play very aggressively or a bit more conservatively. I would recommend to play aggressively because it is made for Preservation Invoker. I would say that you could play even more aggressive than a Disc Priest, which is really fun. But again, it's not for everyone, right? The lizard is not really that like appealing. So obviously this will be my top 5. Preservation Invoker would be at 5, the position 5. So the 4th class I would recommend anyone to play is Windwalker Monk. Windwalker Monk has been reworked from Dragonflight to the War Within, and has been pretty much a better version than in Dragonflight. Now you kind of need a bit of haste to make it work, but it does work. The damage is really nice in the War Within. You have a lot of like disruptive materials, like for example the Whirling Dragon Push that brings someone in the air, which is very annoying to deal with if you are a caster. And in general, they have a toolkit that is well suited for PvP, and that is a great thing. Now, that aside, you also are a bit more tanky than in Dragonflight. You have more utility, in my opinion, and I do feel like the hero talents, yeah, you have Shadowpan and you have Celestial, like Conduit of the Celestials. They're both, I would say they could both be played. Now, there is obviously a meta. You could probably watch a guide from someone on YouTube that is going to explain everything that you need to know about Windwalker, but from what I've seen, it is one of the specs that has one of the better comps in the games. You could play with a DK, for example. Windwalker DK is very annoying to deal with in 3s. You can play Windwalker DH even. You can even play Windwalker Fury, which is very zug-zug. But you could also play a comp that is a bit more with a bit more finesse. You could play Windwalker Frost Mage, you could play Windwalker Fire Mage if it was good, but right now it is not good. But that comp is available whenever it's going to get buffed. You could play Windwalker Affliction Warlock, you can play Windwalker with a Destruction Warlock, you can play Windwalker Balance Druid, which is also very annoying to deal with. You have a lot of comps at your disposal. and you could say that you can replace any Fury Warrior comp, but I would say that Windwalker right now is in a better shape than Fury Warrior. It is a bit harder to master, but I think the knowledge you're going to get from playing Windwalker will obviously give you the push needed to get better at that spec. It is high reward whenever you are going to learn that spec and being better at that spec. There's also high risk. If you're not putting the work to learn the spec, it is going to feel like you're not going to be good at it. It is definitely not a Fury Warrior levels of like easy, but it is interesting how it plays currently in the meta. It does feel like it's way easier than in Dragonflight, but it has still finesses that you need to know to like learn the spec like as a whole. And also, if you're playing Windwalker, you have the availability of playing mistweaver if you want to play healer, and that is also something you could also take into consideration. Now, the third spec I would recommend anyone to currently like main, and it is not really a hard spec, although a lot of people would say that it is a hard spec to play. It is Hunter. Hunter has been really strong, and in 11.0.5, so the War Within, the anniversary patch, which is in November probably, 20th of November, something like that, it will get a rework on Dark Ranger, which is going to be insane. Like, I think you can like look up on Wowhead if you want to. The new animations of Dark Ranger looks very phenomenal. Like, I want to play Dark Ranger now. I will be playing Dark Ranger on my BM Hunter. I'll be playing also Dark Ranger on my MM Hunter. It is everything I actually asked before the War Within has launched. But the good thing is also, it is a Frost Mage meta like right now, and as an MM Hunter, you are actually eating those Frost Mages for breakfast. And if you are very annoyed by Frost Mages in PvP, just play MM Hunter for 2 hours with full gear and just blast them, and you will be very happy about that. But also, you have a few comps at your disposal. It is not as diverse as the two other like specs I have decided to mention, which is Preservation, Evoker, and Windwalker, but it is still like enough open for you to be able to play with anyone. You can play like a jungle, which is very strong with Feral Druid. You can play even like Retribution Paladin, MM Hunter, which is Cupid. Normally would be a bit better with BM Hunter, but BM Hunter is really not that good right now. So play MM Hunter, you could have a lot of success with it. You could also play Tug, which is with a rogue. And if you are finding a competent rogue, you can actually do a lot of damage. Like, just in general, you're going to win games based on CC, but also the unhinged damage of MM Hunter is really annoying to deal with, especially if you have a rogue that actually stun locks for you, so you can actually deal your damage. That's going to be beneficial for you as a comp. But you can also play KFC, which is with a warrior, but again, it depends on the meta. Since there is a lot of mages, warriors are not that great. It is great, but it is not great versus mages. You as an MM Hunter, you are. So I would say play a comp that is very annoying to deal with them, because you will see a lot of them in the arenas in general. So MM Hunter is my third spec that I would recommend anyone, like really anyone, any beginners should actually play MM Hunter, I think, to learn how ranged like DPSs work, but also just in general for the pleasure of playing a spec that is actually working in PvP. As a second position, I would recommend Frost Mage. I would have said first position, but I do feel like it's a lot of finesse that you need to learn. It is not really as beginners friendly as MM Hunter, but Frost Mages has a lot of instant costs. You will see like any arena breakdown, or even RBG's breakdown, like Sokyo RBG, or like any breakdown in general, you don't see a lot of costs. You don't need to play Glacial Spike, you don't need to play Ray of Frost, you can still play around your Icelands. Play around your Ring of Fire, play around your Icelands, do a Glacial Comet, like the Comet Storm ability is also going to bring a big meteor on the enemy, so you can actually deal a lot of damage as a whole, which is all instant costs. It is not that hard. You don't also need to do a lot of polymorphs in general, because your spec can be played, for example, with an affliction warlock, so polymorph is relevant, but it is not like the win condition on at that comp. It is not the best comp, but if you don't want to like deal too much with like CC, you can always do that. Obviously, once you have learned Mage, you should learn about CC and how it works and how you kind of need it to win some matchups. But I think Frost Mage is probably one of the least like mage specs I would say that is revolving around polymorph. Like Fire Mage kind of needs a polymorph to actually do a like combust go on the DPS. Arcane Mage the same, you kind of need to polymorph the healer so then you can do your go and like explode someone. Frost Mages, they don't really do that too much. They still polymorph, but like if they can cleave, they will cleave you. Like they don't need to separate the healer with the DPS to actually like deal a lot of damage. Like trust me, if you're playing Frost Mage with a Frost Decay, you can actually do that. Like the Frost Mage Frost Decay is a good comp. It is very hard to pull off because you need to find a DK that is not gripping someone that is actually like rooted. But it is very strong because once everyone is grouped up, it's unhealable. So Devastation Invoker, the DK is probably stronger, obviously, because they don't really have a lot of roots that are breaking grips, for example, like making grips unable to grip the enemy. But Frost DK has actually the same kind of vibe where you can actually implode people like whenever they're like grouped up. So it's very, very strong. It is not beginners friendly, but you can actually learn it. It is not the hardest like mage spec. Like I said on my easiest spec tier list, because it is very meta, I would say it's probably the best spec out there right now for casters. But also the rotation is not like as important as like for example an arcane mage has. You can really learn it, right? The thing that you need to learn is survive and use your ice block whenever you have to, whenever you need to, and try to like soak up damage with like your alter time and try to alter back like ASAP, for example, whenever you're low. Those are like things that you'll need to learn. The surviving part is probably the hardest thing that you need to learn from that spec, but the rotation itself is not that hard. So I would recommend Frost Mage to a lot of casters that are looking for a new main. I do feel like Frost Mage is a great one. Now a few honorable mentions, because I do want to give a bit of like context. I do feel like if you are a caster, you could also main Affliction Warlock. It's very strong, very meta. You have multiple builds that you can play around, like more of a rotting build, where if you have no uptime, you can play around that with Hullcaller. You can also play Soul Harvester, where you have a bit more uptime and you can do like some big Nightfall procs with a bit of damage because of that, like a bit more, even like a lot more damage. You're like reaching the Chaos Bolt region of damage with Shadow Bolt, which is insane. And I think it's also a cool fantasy, so you can also play that. Another honorable mention that I will not mention at top 1 will be Fury Warrior and also Arms Warrior. Fury Warrior is very beginners friendly. Like I think it is the essence of how to learn how to play melee kind of spec. If you want to like learn how to play melee or just the fundamentals, which is also very important, I do feel like Warrior is one of like the classes that can give you that. You have Fury Warrior, which is like a berserker feel of a spec, which you are like pretty much hitting any button whenever you can and like expend your rage on rampage. Where, for example, Arms Warrior is a bit more methodical in general. You can play Colossus, which is Demolish, which is even more methodical. Or you can play Slayer, where it's about Blazestorm and trying to have those big execute goes, for example. It's interesting, right? But those two are honorable mentions. I could say anything more, like for example DKs, I could say Shamans for like the lore and how it is, Retribution Paladin, because again, who doesn't want to play Warrior of Light? But I do feel like those two specs are really the honorable mentions, because I think you could replace Mage and you could replace Windwalker by a Warrior and Warlock, and it would not be like changing the list too much, but I need to have a top 5, so I would give my top 1 right now. The top 1 spec I would recommend the vast majority of players to play, it is Demon Hunter. Having Demon Hunter is actually, if you think about it, the archetype class that Blizzard actually wants for any spec right now. It has not too many buttons, the rotation is not too complicated. Okay, you have the Reaver hero talent and you have like the Demon Surge talent, which I don't remember the name anymore because of that, where you basically have like a set rotation that you need to do to actually deal a lot of damage on your Blade Dance or on your Chaos Strike. or like death stance or whatever like you're going to do in Metamorphosis, for example. That is like the Reaver talent with like the glaives that you're going to send, which is going to do a lot of damage. But you can also play Demon Surge, which basically like activates whatever you're doing your rotation regardless, right? So it's something that is going to always happen. It's not that complicated, but the other one is a bit more complicated. I would say that you have a good mesh of having to learn your spec and trying to master it, trying to master Glimpse and how it works, trying to master how to play defensive and how to like get away whenever you have to, because you don't need to zug as a demon hunter. You can also just run away whenever you have to, whenever you can, because you have a lot of mobility for that. But you could also say, look, I want to play like a bit more complicated, and that is also possible, right? You have some builds that you can go for and some builds that you cannot really go for, but I do feel like you could also learn the fundamentals with it. Now, I would say fundamentally, warriors are a bit more fundamental than Demon Hunter, because Demon Hunter kind of breaks some rules with how mobility works, how stunts and CC works as well, with their glimpse, how they can glimpse it out, while warriors don't really have that many like buttons that can get you out of a stun. You can also play Storm like a like kidney at the millisecond whenever it happens, but that's not something you're going to fish, right? For example, Glimpse, you could really see, look, Storm like Stormbolt is up, they're going to Stormbolt me directly, I will glimpse out. You could also have like, for example, Omnibar, where it's written literally in how many time, like in how many seconds a Stormbolt will be up. Once Stormbolt is up, glimpse out, and nine chances out of 10, if the warrior is not aware of that, is going to Stormbolt, and the glimpse will just like cancel it. So it's, again, Demon Hunter, very strong, also very meta. It does a lot of damage, which a lot of the damage is coming from passives and dots that are from your abilities. And I do feel like if you wanna do well in season 1, I think Demon Hunter, with having Demon Hunter in mind, is great in solo shuffle, is extremely good in solo RPG, because your mobility gives you the chance to also be a flag carrier, but also be able to be on the map, or like in general. So it means that you can also very much rotate around the map very efficiently. In 2v2, you can play with a resto druid, you can play with a disc priest, you can play with a holy priest, you can play with a holy paladin, you can play with a resto shaman. Obviously, all those specs, you have a preferred one, right, as a demon hunter, but it is one of the specs that has like an easy time in 2v2. You have some natural predators there, like in general, but 2v2 is like a chess, like a checkers, right? So obviously, some matchups you're going to lose, some matchups you're going to auto win. In 3v3, you have also kind of the same joiners of a Windwalker and a Fury Warrior. You have a lot of comps at your disposal. You can play with Elemental Shaman, you can play with a even an Enhancement Shaman, you can play with a DK, you can play with a Warrior, which is very zug, you can play with a Windwalker, you can play even with a Assassination Rogue, you can play with an Affliction Warlock, which is insane amount of damage, like in spread damage in general. You could even play with a feral druid, you could also do that, for example. So you have a lot of comps that are at your disposal, that are not ridicule, and you can really play with anyone, and it's going to work. You can even play double DH for that matter, but it's not going to be that successful at higher rating, but you could just literally play like double DH and go 1800 pretty easily, especially its first season. So you could really do that in 3s. I'm talking about 3s, not double DH in 2s, because you're going to get ridiculized by any healer comp. But you see that this spec is really one of the best specs for meaties. If you really aren't like struggling with choosing, you don't know what to play, and you kind of are a veteran, you already have played warrior, you don't need the fundamentals or whatever, just play Team Demon Hunter. I think Demon Hunter is one of the better like specs right now. Very annoying to deal with, very frustrating to deal with, but I do feel like a lot of players are playing Havoc Demon Hunter, so there is probably a reason why. I think it's probably for fun, and I want to also level 1 to experiment it myself. Since leveling is super easy in the World Within, I will have everything level 80 at one point, and I will for sure make a video about them to do a review in the World Within on how they play and how they are. But like, those are my top 5 specs that I would recommend for the World Within. Let's summarize it. My fifth is Preservation Invoker, my fourth is Windwalker, my third is my Frost Mage. The Frost Mage is second, the Demon Hunter, Havoc Demon Hunter is first, and two honorable mentions which could replace anyone on this list, which is Warrior, the whole class, and Warlock, which is Affliction Warlock, which I would recommend, while the other two specs from Warlocks are not that great right now. They are going to get buffed at one point. I think Chaos Bolt just doesn't do any damage, like enough damage to be very scary, and Demonology Warlock has some struggles. They do damage, but Diabolist is not that good. So you do play Soul Harvester, and Soul Harvester is not as efficient as with Affliction Warlock. So there you are. So hopefully you do enjoy this video. If you did like the video, please like the video. It helps me with the algorithm. If you do want to subscribe, be sure to subscribe, and be sure to check the description for the sponsorship with a Trade Skill Master, which of course thank you guys for sponsoring this video. Have a good day. Bye.